welcome to Rick's Scale Model Fix and another video build. This time we're going to be taking on Bristol Beaufighter Mark X from Tamiya. Sometimes it's quite easy to forget about kits that have been released in the past, and our focus of attention in the hobby is always on what's new and bringing that to you with an idea that you can see what's in the box, so you can see how the build is before you purchase the kit. This one's been around since 1999 and it's been languishing in the stash pretty much since then. So I thought it was time to have a look at some of the classics, and certainly while the Revel kit is more or less double the price of this one at the moment and has some better details and flaps and things like that, then this kit is not to be overlooked, and whilst it's quite basic, making it a nice kit for someone who's relatively new to the hobby, it still builds up to be quite an impressive looking model. So let's have a look what's in the box. Box top artwork is fairly nice for the time, featuring one of the decal options in the kit, just about to embark on an attack run or a torpedo run on some shipping. On the sides you've got the option included in the kit decal sheet for MBT or NT950. On the other side you've got the other option for RD351. Box ends replicate the artwork, and your kit number for this one is 67. The instruction booklet is black and white. You've got a brief synopsis of the type and its operational history. Before opening the instruction booklet, you've got Tamiya paint cross-reference, tools and what's needed, and some helpful tips before construction starts, with the cockpit at the bottom of page 2. It is basic, you can't see much in there when it's completed, so I'll just be adding some Edard etched seat belts I think to this one. The instrument panel is raised bezels with a decal to go over the top, and there's 2 pilot figures included in this kit. Opening the instruction book further, we see further work on the cockpit floor, with the cockpit heater pipe being painted and added, fuselage sides coming together, trapping your pre-assembled work in between. And then we've got a choice of tails, so we've got the Type A tail or Type B tail, which features that fillet. Moving further through the instruction booklet sees us add the chosen tail for the type or version that you're building to the fuselage, along with the tail wheel. Might be better to leave that off until the build's completed. Stage 6 sees the wings coming together with the navigation lights in the end, and then stage 7 is the outer wing panels being married up to the centre section with the crew access hatch that's saying not to be glued as it is posable. Straight away onto stage 8, and we've got the undercarriage units. It says make 2, mirror image of each other. They then slot in with the wheel well into the nacelles on each wing, completing the build of that section with the gear doors. Once the undercarriage is completed, then we're onto the engines. Fairly basic detail, nothing spectacular, but it's good enough and looks okay when painted. Tail being added at the end. Notice this has the V tail, or the later type tail of the Beaufighter. Intakes and those completed nacelles. Intakes again being completed for the tops of the engines along with the propellers, and you have got the spinner cap there for the later variant of the Beaufighter. Stage 14 sees your build conclude with thimble nose, normal nose, cockpit glass, observer's glass, those intakes and propellers being added, and it's also noting there that part A13 is not used in this kit. Part 15 goes on to the rocket rails and the rockets themselves, along with a couple of 500-pound bombs and an 18-inch torpedo. These are then cemented in place on the underside of the airframe. Just be careful of your weapon mix there, as it's not applicable to all operations of the Beaufighter. Basic information is provided for the paint diagrams. It's in black and white, and it just says Coastal Squadron 236 1944 and Coastal Squadron 254 1944, with no other detail provided. Decal sheet provided in the kit. These don't look to have aged too badly. I'm going to order some aftermarket decals. I'm not going to risk putting all that hard work into making the model to find that the decals disintegrate on contact with the water. Tamiya do include the black and white invasion stripes as decals. You just paint the model white and then add the black stripes over the top. There's some basic cockpit instrumentation and seat belts, along with some very minor stencil markings. The smaller sheet carries the actual markings for the airframe themselves. So as this is a build and not a kit review, I'm not going to go through the sprues one by one in this instance, and we'll crack on with the build, and we'll have a look at stage 1 of the assembly sequence, which focuses on the cockpit. So I'll go and source the parts off the sprues, and I'll come back to the cutting mat in due course. So we've amassed quite a few parts there, so we're going to have a look at assembling the cockpit floor. So we'll just move these out of the way. So detail is rather basic but adequate. Once you view that through the open cockpit, you're not going to actually see that much. There's lovely representation of an anti-slip coating on the floor itself. So let's get this in paint. So what we're going to do is we're going to assemble the basic cockpit tub first, and then we're going to prime it and paint it. So we're going to add everything to this that is actually the same colour. So we'll just set about cleaning up these attachment points, as always. Be diligent with your clean-up, otherwise it will affect the fit of the parts later on in your build. So we're going to glue bulkhead A2 into place. Now there are ejector pin marks on the rear face. Again, how much of it you're going to see is debatable. Probably not a lot, because it's going to be buried in the fuselage. So we'll just clean attachment points up again. So the door and the cutout face forward, and it simply goes in place there. So we'll add the glue from the underside. The fit is a little bit sloppy actually with that key, so there is a bit of wiggle room there, so just make sure everything does fit precisely. Just a little trick there to make sure everything's in alignment. You can actually offer it up to the fuselage section, which we're going to need to paint anyway because it's got the stringers and formers on the inside, and that way you just make sure everything does line up. So the Beaufighter is not a small kit in 48, as you can see. It's minus its wings, it is quite a size. So hopefully this glue started to bite, which it has. And then if we turn over the page, we've got A1, which goes onto the observer station at the rear. I'm just looking at what colour that's calling out for. So it's saying the fuselage interior is semi-gloss black. I'd be more inclined to say it was RAF interior green. And that's what I'll paint this, I think. Black is just going to kill anything that's visible through those windows, and it's not going to make for a very interesting model. Again, just cleaning up the required areas, and this locates onto the rear like so. Just remember, it's a Tamiya kit, so if nothing fits, it's probably you. You've got it in the wrong place, or upside down, or something like that. Again, we can check positioning of the bulkhead against the inside of the fuselage. That does fit. Everything fits as intended there. So we've got the mount for the observer's seat. So again, just clean up. That's quite a large attachment point there for, I don't want to risk breaking the part. So I think this is the first Warbird build that's going on the channel. We've got plenty more to come, plenty of builds in mind. So the observer's seat mounts onto the top of that, but just to save and make painting easier, I'm just going to leave that off. We've got the pilot's seat, control column, so I think that's where we want to be in terms of building up the basic cockpit tub. So it's off to the spray bay now, get some primer on these and get them painted up. So we've primed and painted the inside of each fuselage half with Cockpit Green XF71 from Tamiya. We then sprayed any of the areas that we're going to weather with Alclad aluminium, including the cockpit floor. So we just worked in sections on this one, and once that was dry we gave it a squirt of, as to Smart Price, hairspray, ready for the chipping. So we've got some warm water and a stipple brush. So we're just going to examine areas where we think the aircrew might have held the hands, or high excess egress areas, and we're just going to rub away at this Tamiya cockpit green until we start getting the aluminium showing through. Now it does take a while to get going, so I'm using a brush that's had its bristles cut off, if the camera will focus there. So it is quite abrasive, and we're just rubbing away in a random pattern and around the edges. So work's progressing well. We've got the inside of the fuselages done, so they've had a Flory Models dark dirt wash added and look quite the part now. Pity you can't really see any of it once the fuselage halves are joined together, so you're not going to be able to see much at all. So maybe if I was to build the kit again, I'd have a second thought, maybe just paint that interior green and have done. The cockpit floor itself is looking quite neat now. So again, we've weathered up and chipped the seats and any areas that we think the aircrew might cross as they're walking around the airframe. There is a door on that bulkhead, and then we've got the pilot's area as well. We've just done a basic job on the cockpit, nothing too fancy, just a bit of dry brushing. Instrument panel, decals, as we thought, just disintegrated, so I've just fudged it a little bit, painted it black, given it a wash, and then we've just filled the dials in with some Tamiya clear green, and I think that'll just give anybody who's looking in the cockpit a basic idea that there's something there. So we've got all the smaller assemblies just to put together, but we're just currently working on the control column. So the last thing we need to do is just paint the leather gator at the bottom of that control column. So we're just going to use some Tamiya khaki, and we're just going to hand paint this. Right, so we're just going to add these final cockpit parts. So we're just going to put a small amount of Tamiya Extra Quick in the hole for the control lever. And our control column. Just holding that, we're going to glue that from the underneath. So like so. Just working with the instrument panel now. So clip the screws off. We're going to add the rudder pedals to the unit. They slot in from behind. And they've been weathered as well at the same time using that hairspray chipping technique. And that slides in place at the front of the cockpit tub. To complete that unit, again, we'll just add the glue from the underside. And there we go, that's our completed Beaufighter cockpit interior. So all that's left to do now is join the fuselage halves together. So we're just test fitting the fuselage in the cockpit tub in the fuselage, and just making sure that it doesn't interfere anywhere with the fit, as the fit is pretty good considering the age of the kit. The fit is still up to standards of today's kits. So everything fits. Now there is an access door for the belly, part A6. To be honest, I'm going to glue it closed because you can't really see anything in there at all. It's just extra work that we don't need. We will probably position the pilot's entry ladder in the down position. You can see a little bit more there. Also, a handy tip with the fuselage in cockpit joined together, there's a couple of holes in the spine of the aircraft that need to be opened up for the aerials. So to save you any hard work, you can actually get to those from the inside once the fuselage is dry with your twist drill, making for a lot cleaner hole than trying to do a hole on each side of the fuselage prior to that. However, the one on the back, you can't get to that, so I've just marked it there with a little hole, and we'll open that up with a twist drill as the time arrives. So we're going to set about gluing the fuselage together now. We're going to do it in sections. So we don't need to glue the internals, I don't think. I think they're a good enough fit. But actually, just to save it breaking away in the future, perhaps rattling around, we'll just put a bit of glue on that rear bulkhead just to hold everything where it should be. Only needs a little bit, a few minutes to grip. So we're going to work with the top first. We're going to get the best fit that we can on the spine, and we're just going to start here with the tail end. Just working in small sections. Clamp on that, so just use these crocodile clips. Just make sure that you're not getting any glue where you put the crocodile clip, because it will leave an impression of its teeth. So the fit's really good along the spine, so we're just going to relax the joint and run some glue along there. We're just gently going to press that together. If some oozes out, that doesn't matter. And again, we're just going to hold that until the glue dries. And then this bit wants to just pry out slightly. So we'll put some glue along there, and we'll just pull that in, making sure all the panel lines line up. There we go. So there was a little bit of force needed just to make sure the panel lines line up coming over the top of the aircraft there. Give that time to bite, and when we're holding that, we can just run some down this front seam. Get that in as well. Some glue on my fingers there, never mind. So when you get anything like this where I've just got a fingerprint, just don't touch it, leave it, and that'll just simply come off with a few swipes of a sanding stick. So just remember, work on the principle that you want to get the best fit you can, because that stops you having to do any filling. Certainly with one of these kits, they should literally fall together. So we're just putting a couple of bits of masking tape on just to hold the joint, especially at this end where it wanted to just prise itself apart slightly. So we're just making sure that the cross section all joins up, which it does, and we've got a pretty good seam there, as that's going to be the most visible part of the aircraft. And then we're going to turn our attentions to the undersides, and I've missed a sprue attachment point there, so we'll just shave that off. Not quite as important here to get a really good fit, because it's going to be covered by the wing centre section, but nonetheless you want to try your best, because it could affect the wing when you join those up later in the build. So we have a good selection of clamps, so I don't think they're going to really want to. There we go. And then we're just going to glue this section again. Again, this wants to just splay out slightly. So we get plenty of glue on there so it doesn't ping apart later on, as it's under a bit of tension. There's the aperture for part A6, so what we'll do is we'll just nip the hinges off and we'll get that to lie in there the best fit that we can. And we're just working our way along the rest of the undersurface. So very good in my clean up there. I've still got some remnants of the sprue gates. A bit tight then, let's snap the tape. So we're going to leave that now to dry. So let's just nip these hinges off. Part A6. Make sure there's nothing to interfere with the fit. And it goes in like that. So we just need to push it down ever so slightly. And we have a perfect fit there. So what we'll do is we'll just add some glue to this. And we're just going to gently just take up the slack. Probably going to need a little bit of Mr. Surfacer just to square everything up. But it's flat and it's straight and level. That's our fuselage joined together. So we'll leave that for a few hours to dry fully. Just clear the bench and we'll just grab our instruction booklet. So don't think your build stalls while you're waiting for parts to dry. So we can now look at building the tails up, the vertical tails. So depending on which marking you want to do, you've got two sets there. Now with the age of the decal sheet, I've actually ordered an aftermarket set. I'm not 100% on which airframe I'm going to do at this point. I would like to do an aircraft with the thimble nose, which is part A15, because it looks a little bit different, and possibly with the spinner caps on as well. I do have a model in the collection of a Beaufighter, so it would be radically different if we did it that way. So it's interesting to see what's on the sheet when it arrives. So that's on its way, it's been dispatched. So we'll stall on that section for now. We can dive in and have a look at these wings. So it's two sections with panels that then join to a centre solid section. So again, I'm going to assume with this being Tamiya that the fit is excellent. You've got to decide now whether you want the launch rails on and things like that. So again, we're coming to a bit of a halt because I'm not sure what fitting and what arms need to be fitted to the kit that I'm going to be depicting, which could leave us a little bit confused. I don't want to open all the holes and then have to go and close them all up, because there is quite a few. So we'll just skip through. We could do the undercarriage, we could do the engines, and we could add the tailplanes. So I think what we'll do is we'll just do some of these little small jobs, like join the tailplanes together. Perhaps have a look at this centre wing section, see how the fit marries up to the fuselage once it's dry. So I think once we've done that, we'll call it an end to part 1. So thanks for following so far. I hope you have enjoyed what you've seen up till this point, and you'll join me in part 2 when the build continues. So until next time everyone, please look after yourselves, stay well and take care.